What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. So today we're doing the first of a new series I'm starting, deck reviews with a special guest, and today's guest is Rukan. Rukan, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hello everyone, my name's Rukan. I started playing Pokemon around September. I did my first regional with Vika Bulu, and that's sort of been my claim to fame since I started playing. I did well, top 16 at Dallas soon after, and that quickly got me into a sponsored team, and I'm pretty much at my invite now, so I've kind of been chilling from regionals, and I've just been building deck lists and helping my team try to do their best at upcoming regionals.
Cool. Yeah, so you made your name for yourself in a bit of a short time.
Yes.
So today, Rukan is kind of an expert on Vika Bulu, so we're going to be talking about Vika Bulu with him, the list, the matchups, and then on Wednesday's upload, he and I will be playing a best 2 out of 3, featuring one of us playing Vika Bulu. So I sent Rukan this list. This is Kikabulu, the list that I've been using, and he just has a few notes that he's going to talk about on the list before we get into the matchups.
Yep. So I have a lot of thoughts on Kikabulu, but since I've written a PokeBeach article that's going to be released probably pretty soon, there's a few things I can't say. I can't give full details about the list that I would personally play, but in general, if you look at the numbers for Kikabulu, you're going to end up with one Grubbin turn 1 a lot of the time, which is fine if you go first, because most decks can't snipe that lone Grubbin if Vika Bulu goes first. But if it goes second, you might have like only a 1 in 3 chance to develop 2 Grubbin, so that's a pretty scary scenario to be in. I personally don't like that, so I do like the Bridget lists. I don't think Kikabulu still has a lot of merits, but I definitely would run 1 Bridget, and I would probably stick. In the past, I've always run 4 Skyla, except for maybe like Hartford. But like since Hartford, I've run 4 Skyla in my Vika Bulu list. Skyla is just really, really, really good in Bulu. It boosts your turn 2 Vika Bulu odds a lot for a single card inclusion. So I definitely run 4. I might consider going down to 3 since Skylas do have diminishing returns when you start running too many. But like I still think the 4th one's pretty good.
Cool. Okay, so get a Bridget in there, up our Skyla counts. And if we want more details, check out PokeBeach in about 2 weeks. Yep. Sounds good. Okay, so this isn't all about a list, so that's all we're going to talk about the list for today. We're going to go into matchups now. So Rukan is going to walk us through how to go up against some decks with Vika Bulu, and how he thinks the matchup should usually go if both decks are running efficiently. So first on my list, we've got Vika Bulu versus Greninja. So Rukan, tell me about that matchup a bit.
That's probably the most straightforward matchup you can have. It's simply, if Bulu can get its turn 2 Vika Vault off, it usually wins. Just because you just keep training KOs, you get to try to hit your manual attachments. You basically buy a lot of time if you hit your first Vika Vault, because you'll be able to start taking KOs, and you're able to deny like the double Greninja Shuriken play for a knockout. And if they can't do that, you use your GX attack, and you sort of curve out into the rest of the game. If you don't hit that, things can get really rough. If you don't hit the turn 2 Vika Vault and they start shadow stitching you, it's basically over. You'd have to run some crazy tech cards to get the extra energy as on board, or you'd need to like I don't even know if you can come back if you get shift stitched before.
Right.
Before you get your turn 2 Vika Vault. The only exception is I once played a game where someone decided to skip their
Shadow Stitch,
their water duplicates to wally up into a shadow stitching. And that is a winnable scenario, because then you just chain horn attacks for the first knockout.
Right.
And then you miss a turn, and then you set your Vika Vault, and then you roll from there.
Well, I don't think Greninjas today are ideally playing Wally, and that's not really an ideal turn either. So
I agree.
Maybe some misplays from your opponent can get you out of that missed opportunity on turn 2 Vika Vault. So I've actually been playing a bit of this matchup at home in testing. So Greninjas have been playing 1 counter catcher, And the one counter catcher is really strong against Vika Bulu because you can bring up the Vika Volt and then just giant water shuriken their bench Pokemon until you take your 6 prizes.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
so how do you feel
So
about that?
one of the things I like to do is I just like to start attaching excess energies
Okay.
onto my Vika Vault.
Right.
So worst case scenario, can you actually use the Vika Vault to take a knockout?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is you want to just develop a lot of threats.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you're going to have excess lightning energy or just not enough Bulus on board to attach energies.
Yeah.
So it comes to a point where you start attaching just energies onto your Vika Vaults.
Okay.
And then that shouldn't be an issue. If you run a Float Stone, then it should just straight up be a non-issue because you'll have access to like 3 to 4 copies of Guzma. I would run 3 to 4 copies of Skyla. The question is, would you run the Float Stone?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Bulu needs the Float Stone, so I can see
I
Greninja making a comeback.
I saw someone playing one escape rope in their in their Vika Bulu.
Okay, so my thought process was back at Hartford, I ran a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for the switch was Espeon Gardevoir, right? Because if you use an escape rope, you knock their Espeon out of the active, and that's not what you want.
Okay.
And Floatstone, you don't want to attach a Floatstone to a Bulu, because then you can't one-shot against Espeon Garb.
Mm-hmm.
So the switch lets you bring in an extra Bulu, dispel the confusion, and then take a knockout.
Okay.
So I would, if I had to choose between 3 due to the popularity of Espeon Garb, because Espeon Garb was pretty big at Hartford. That was one of the big threats.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran 1 copy of Switch.
Yeah.
Back then. And I think that's probably not a bad idea. Although I would argue that the Switch is probably a dead card outside of the Greninja and Espeon Gardevoir matchup.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So Espeon Gardevoir is doing really well in Cups right now.
Mm-hmm.
First place. So I would include it to Elite Cup. However, Espeon does have a bit of a target on its back for the next standard regionals. So I might consider cutting it because I think the rest of the field will be prepared for Espeon Garb.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Portland where everyone was all in on Lucario and Espeon got a free pass. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, for Cups it sounds pretty smart to put in a switching card because Espeon Garb and Vika Bulu itself are very popular right now for Cups.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So moving on from Greninja, we're going to go to Gardevoir. So let's talk about straight Gardevoir right now. The current Vika Bulu lists are not very good against straight Gardevoir, correct?
They have no answers that you would typically consider to be. They have no Tapu Koko for spread. They have no Clefairy.
Mm-hmm.
They have no Coco GX. They have 1 Mew, which is the best thing you can argue.
Yeah, and even that's not very good.
Yeah. I like having the 3rd energy recycler. Well, actually, back at Hartford, I ran 2 energy recycler and a Brock's Grid. And that was pretty good because you burn a lot of energies against Gardevoir, and Gardevoir was half the field back then.
Right,
you don't
yeah.
have that either, so you could run the risk of just burning out your energies before you actually take your 6 prizes against Gardevoir.
So, at Hartford, did you run a Clefairy?
I ran 1 Mew, 1 Clefairy, and 1 Tapu Koko GX.
Okay, and so did the Clefairy and the Tapu Koko GX, what did that make the Gardevoir matchup look like?
Okay, I played 4 Gardevoir matchups that day, and I won every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very dominant. However, I ended up playing against Cena like a few months down the line after the meta had really changed.
Yeah.
Then at that point I was like, okay, Zoroark's out now, Armor Press is a thing, and Gardevoir is less of an influence. So what I did was I changed my list. I cut out the Clefairy, I cut out the Tapu Koko GX, I cut out the extra energy recovery, namely the Brock's Grid, and I replaced it with 2/2 Octillery and a bunch of Kukuis, so I could take those knockouts through Armor Press and potentially take a knockout against Gardevoir.
Okay.
And that worked for a League Cup I went to. I beat all but one Gardevoir player. But then I played against Cena. And Cena he does not run the same lists that you would expect a Gardevoir player to run at a League Cup.
Yeah,
I think like a lot of League Cup Gardevoir players, they cut important cards without necessarily considering why.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case is they cut the parallel city counts down to 1. And that parallel city count in Gardevoir is single-handedly what swings the Bulu matchup.
If they're playing the counters, because Like if they play Kukui, then the Kukui doesn't matter because of the parallel.
If they're not playing those counters, the parallel cities don't necessarily help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the Gardevoir versus Buzzwole matchup is very rock paper scissors because each can bring their own set of counters to the table, and it's like if I bring the Clefairy in, dodged the threat of Parallel City.
Okay.
I ended up playing like one game against Cena with my old Hartford list,
Mm-hmm.
and it was substantially closer, but I ended up losing anyways because I got N down to 1 and he paralleled my like draw support away. Actually, I didn't run draw support in my Hartford list, but something like that happened.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
But that's sort of how I feel about the matchup. It depends very much on whether your counters counter their counters. And last thing I didn't mention is if Gardevoir just runs their own Clefairy, it's very, very, very bad for Bulu.
Right.
Because not only you don't want to burn 3 energy discard on a 1 prize Pokemon, but if you don't, they can swing with the Gardevoir and take a knockout on your Bulu.
Yeah, exactly. So, Tapu Bulu versus versus Broken Guardy. What's the matchup there? Unfavorable for sure, right?
It's very unfavored. I say it's probably 60 to 65% in the Broken Gardevoir's favor, depending on their techs.
Okay.
I think it's definitely on the 30 to 35% range if the Broken Gardevoir runs Clefairy.
Okay.
I think Sylveon actually makes the matchup easier for Bulu because
it's something you can knock out, right?
Yeah, it's a 2 prize that you can just straight up knock out very early on. So you don't need to deal with like playing Guzma. You don't need to deal with like discarding 3 energies to knock out a Vulpix. I think the Broken Boar matchup is significantly more challenging than any Sylveon.
Sounds good. Okay, so talked about Broken Guardy. Now let's add Zoroark into the mix. How about Zoroark Gardevoir?
Okay, the Zoroark matchup depends almost exclusively on the parallel city count. As long as they can just keep the parallel cities down, you won't be able to take your one shot because you need the combo of both Choice Band and Field Blower to get that knockout.
Okay.
And that's pretty uncommon, especially if they like start hitting their ends.
Mm-hmm.
So the more ends, the more parallel cities Zoroark runs, the more favorable its matchups will be. Zoropod is probably the hardest Zoroark matchup aside from Weavile. You actually just can't beat Weavile.
Okay.
Because they have the foul play and they have the Trickster GX. But Zoropod's probably the second hardest to beat because of Armor Crest. Well, there's also Zoroark. Zoroark is also hard because they have Gardevoir, and you might not have a counter for Gardevoir.
Right. So how is Zoroark? I know it's probably favorable for Zoroark. In my testing, it's favorable, but I also play the Clefairy, so that makes me confidently favorable.
If you play the Clefairy, you will beat them.
Mm-hmm.
The strategy usually goes, since you can't expect to knock out their first Gardevoir, try to get your Oranguru up, try to chain card draw, and just try to keep knocking out their Zoroarks before they really have a chance to set up. That's, I think, the most reliable strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have too many options to come back once they set up and you're not ahead in the prize race.
Mm-hmm.
You very much need to take the early lead in the prize race.
There have been games that I lost just because they were able to Guzma, 2 Zoroarks and a Lele and win that way. So that is a possible route. But the Gardevoirs make it very hard to... It's hard to just ignore the Gardevoirs and let them sit there, build up energy.
Yep. Clefairy definitely helps both sides in that matchup.
Yeah. Clefairy's a monster. Alright, cool. So, Zoroark, definitely unfavorable, and it could get more unfavorable as techs go along.
Yeah.
So if the Clefairy's in there, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next... Let's go to the next Zoroark variant. Zoroark Lycanroc.
So I'm gonna lump this together with Lucario. They say they serve they have similar issues.
Okay.
In that they have type weakness, so you have the potential to take an extra knockout without needing to hit your Field Blower or Choice Band by Guzming up a Lucario, hitting it with Mew, or just Guzming up a Lycanroc and hitting that with Bulu.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the main factor. They both have their upsides. The Rock one obviously tends to go for more of the Grubbin type strategy, which I think makes the Zoroark variant stronger against Vika Bulu.
Okay.
Whereas I think the Lucario one, it's better tuned to take one shots and try to keep up in the prize race. So I think that one's better against the Bridget Bulu.
Okay, so Lycanroc Zoroark is, let's say we're playing against all Kikabulus, especially that's how I am because I live near Kika. So and I think a lot of people also caught onto the deck and they like that list. So Lycanroc Zoroark, if I want to play a Zoroark variant, one of the fighting ones, Lycanroc Zoroark is slightly better against Kikabulu. You're saying?
I agree. Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
And then Lucario Zoroark. So what is that matchup like against Bulu? Is it 50-50? Is it
I think it's
dependent on techs?
Although it kind of depends on the Mew count. The second Mew is definitely very, very helpful.
Okay.
But it's very hard to fit in all those extra techs into Bulu.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a prize race. If one player, if like the Lucario player misses one of its Aura Strikes with Regirock, that can be very, very bad. If it doesn't stick a Parallel City, that can be very, very bad. Likewise, if Bulu whiffs their Choice Band, it's very, very bad. It's very much a coin flip matchup to see who misses.
Yeah, it's who can run hotter, kind of.
Yeah,
because like
Bulu to list, since Zoroark just has Zoroark, it's less likely to miss. But if both players don't miss, the Bulu player typically wins.
Yeah, the plays I really like are when you can get your Strong Energy Choice Band, Regirock, or Strike off onto the Bulu, and you just Parallel City'd with the grass typing reducer on their side. So now they have to hit the Choice Band to kill the Lucario and a Field Blower to get the Parallel City out, and you just took a knockout on their 180 HP Bulu. So it's very tempo oriented. I actually think it's a pretty fun matchup to play because both sides have a chance really the whole time. Okay, so and Zoroark, you wanted to talk about that a bit?
I think it's one of the better matchups for Zoroark.
Okay.
Because they have access to both Armor Press and Parallel Cities. So, and it's probably the most consistent list. And you still have Crossing Cut if you need to take a one shot. So the idea is you just do everything you can to deny one shots. On average, Zoroark will be consistent enough, and Bulu will be inconsistent enough that they will deny enough one shots to the point that Bulu just loses the prize race.
Okay. Cool. So that match, where is it in terms of 50-50, 60-40?
I think it's 55 to 60% in the Zoroark's favor,
Okay.
especially if they run the Sudowoodo Counter Energy
Right.
package, which I think is very, very good. But overall, I think Zoroark's exodus from Portland was probably one of the biggest factors in Bulu doing slightly better. And Bulu's always done okay, but it did actually squeezed into top 8 for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much because Zoroark left.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on that is a lot of players that pilot Zoroark, they play incorrectly, right? They try to parallel and shrink the Bulu players' board when they should be shrinking their own side to reduce damage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why a lot of Bulus make top 32. So before Portland, even before Portland Bulus made top 32 because people playing Zoroark were misplaying. Once they hit top 32, the pro players they're not going to misplay, and then they would play Zoroark or something, and they would just weed out the Bulus.
Yep.
But now Zoroark's out, Gardevoir also more or less out. None of them made top 32, I believe, or very few.
I think maybe one or two. It was smaller than Charlotte, but I can check that.
I think there was one straight Gardevoir. Honestly, I'm not gonna say, but this substantially more. So it was a much cleaner field for Bulu.
Yeah, for sure. Hang on, let me just. All right. So next, Buzzwole.
Yep.
Okay.
This is once again a very coin flip matchup. So Buzzwole is always.
Oh, I think Rukan froze there. Can you hear me, man? Oh, you kind of froze there for a second. You
okay.
Yeah. So just start over on Buzzwole. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about Buzzwole Lycanroc.
Yep.
Buzzwole Lycanroc is just a very, very fast deck that will always take 6 prizes relatively quickly. So it's mostly on Bulu to not miss those prizes, or to simply keep up in the prize race.
Mm-hmm.
I found from my experience that like one thing I do against other matchups with Bulu is like, okay, I didn't hit everything I need. I'm just gonna put up Lele, hit with it, retreat, and then sort of hit with Bulu the next turn, and that's sort of like improve my energy economy, right?
Okay.
If you do that against Buzzwole, what they can do is they can strong choice band. They hit your Lele for like around 100 damage or so, and then they put 30 damage onto a Vika Vault, and maybe with a few jet punches they put a few more damage on the Lele, and it comes to a point in the late game where they can Guzma up a Vika Vault and put 30 onto your Lele and take like a 3 prize turn.
Okay.
So you have to be very aware of that. Tanking with Lele is not as good as just tanking with Bulu in general, because Bulu can heal off that damage. With
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's say that the Bulu is hitting turn 2 or turn 3 Vika Volt every game. What is the matchup here?
I would probably say if they actually hit turn 2 every single turn, it's probably very, very in Bulu's favor, probably in the 65% range.
Okay.
And even then, I don't think it's that low, because you can still miss your choice bands, and Buzzrock can always just hit their elixirs and just mow you down.
Yeah, I think Buzzwole Lycanroc's one of those decks that kind of always have a chance as long as they're not too far behind, just because they have really good aggression. They have Dangerous Rogue, which is a big attack, and they have max elixirs, so they can get a big attack out of what seems like nowhere.
And they have Sudowoodo, which really swings.
Yeah, Sudowoodo's a very good card.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would probably say Bulu's gonna be completely disadvantaged after the next set, though, because they're getting the baby Buzzwole, so they have a third way to knock out a Bulu for 1 energy.
Yeah, that baby Buzzwole's gonna be tight.
Yeah, and they have Beast Ring too. Like you're just, ooh.
All right. Okay, so next is Espeon Gardevoir.
That's a bad matchup. That is a very bad matchup. They have Gardevoir and they have Confusion. A lot of Bulus have cut their switching effects.
Yep. Like we were just talking about.
If you discard your energy, you get one shot by Espeon. So.
Right.
Now that's bad against Gardevoir, because typically against any other Gardevoir variant, you just want to keep your energy on board, so you can keep threatening damage after they establish Garbotoxin, but you can't do that against Espeon Gardevoir.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you hit your Field Blowers somewhat consistently throughout maybe the first 2 Garbotoxin locks,
it's not always enough, because you need the choice of 2 to take the 1 shot, and you either need to flip heads on your coin flip,
or get Guzma.
That Field Blower in combination with like a Guzma.
Okay. Yeah, so what a lot of people have been asking me about, well, Espeon Garb doesn't seem like too bad of a matchup for Bulu. All I need to do is Sycamore and hit my Field Blower.
No. You need to hit your Field Blower, and you need to hit
Choice Band.
And heads on your Confusion flip.
Or Guzma, yeah. So there is a lot to do there. Plus, Espeon Garb also runs Parallel City, so they can also... So,
they can actually deny 1-shots.
Yeah, so even if they don't get a tool on their Garbotoxin, you need to hit a Field Blower for the city.
Yeah. I think the path to victory for Bulu is you kind of want to develop double Vika Vault, because once you have 2 Vika Vaults up, your Field Blower becomes worth twice as much energy each time you play it.
Okay.
It doubles the value of your Field Blowers. So
right.
You need to ration those Field Blowers. The other out is, if you go first and you just snipe their Garbotoxin and it stays down.
Okay.
But those are pretty unlikely, and it's definitely in Espeon's favor.
Cool.
I'm not sure I would play Bulu if my goal was to take first place at a League Cup, since Espeon's been so popular. But it's still a very good pick if you just want a top 8 at League Cup.
Sounds good. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Hoopa. So, Quad Hoopa, attacking Hoopa got some popularity from Portland, so let's talk about this matchup.
I think so long as you run Orang Guru, the matchup is extremely, extremely lopsided. If you don't run the Oranguru, the matchup can be a bit trickier.
Okay.
So one of the win conditions is to run out of energy. Bulu has, if you run 7 grass, 4 lightning, and 2 recyclers, you have a potential of 21 energies to use. And you're probably going to need to discard for most of the knockouts, ignoring the situation where you can use Mew to use the GX attack and then have that Mew survive.
Okay.
That's the only scenario where that doesn't happen, but that's pretty unlikely to happen because Hoopa has Mewtwo, or they just might have enough energy on board. In general, you should be prepared to burn 6 sets of discards.
Okay.
Off of Vika Vault. Plus, you need that extra energy, extra 4th energy on Vika Vault. So essentially, you've only got 2 energies to burn if your opponent plays smartly.
Okay.
So, you want to swing for a big energy conservation turn when you can.
Mm-hmm.
B, you want to, you can never really afford to pay a retreat, except with a Lele or something like that. So you need to conserve your Guzmas and or your switching effect. But like all this goes out the window if you just play a Hoopa. So just play a Hoopa.
An Oranguru. Yeah. So the Oranguru to draw, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That can one shot one of the Hoopas without.
Yeah. So with only 3 energy, and you don't have to discard it, and they can't one shot it back. So. Yeah, seems like a really good attacker, and I think most people will be playing Oranguru anyway, so...
Yeah, I think that's a smart play.
So,
I tried a little Octillery lately, hoping to, capitalize on the Brooklet Hills from fighting variants. Turns out it's not that great, because it has 30 less HP, so it's threatening to give up an extra prize.
Okay.
And that's pretty bad when that matchup is such a prize race.
Yeah, Octillery does seem good, but it also can't get you your draw power in a pinch like Oranguru can.
Yeah, it doesn't have the Nest Ball synergy.
Yeah.
The Bulu runs.
Okay, so I think the last matchup we're going to talk about here is Sylveon. So Sylveon is another one of those wonky decks that got some popularity at Portland. So how does Bulu deal with Sylveon GX?
Sylveon has as close to an auto win for Bulu as you can get. You can usually get away with turn 3 Vika Vault and still win. You just need to always mind your outs. So it's not just enough to set up a Vika Vault and take a knockout, because you also need to take the combo turn with the Choice Band and the one shot eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, you always avoid discarding energies. Because if you're not discarding energies in one shot, you're vulnerable to like a Plea GX or a chain of. Actually, you wouldn't be vulnerable to energy discard, but like you're vulnerable to a Plea. Okay. And that's one of the outs. You also want to mind your hand size, because Delinquent's always a threat, and you also want to conserve your field blowers, because Sylveon runs both Lusamine and Parallel City, so they can eventually get to a point where you cannot take one shots.
Okay. Yeah, but for the most part, I think if your opponent flips over Eevee and attaches a Fairy Energy, you should be pretty happy about the match.
Just don't go too aggro, but at the same time, understand that you shouldn't go too slow. Like you should. A lot of the Sylveon lists are running Gardevoir now, so you want to conserve your Guzma in hand if possible, so you can snipe the Ralts before they pull any shenanigans. And don't burn through all your field blowers, and don't burn through all your Choice Bands.
Excuse me. Okay, sounds good. Also, while you were talking about one of those matchups, I looked it up, and you were correct. There were no Zoroarks in Portland. There were no Gardevoirs at all in Portland, top 32.
Yeah. A lot of the good players, and I think rightly so, were scared off from the Lucario threat.
Yeah. Another aggressive deck is not what Guardy wants to see across from the table. Yep. Okay, so cool. We talked about a lot of good matchups here with Vika Bulu. And Wednesday, I will be piloting Vika Bulu in a best 2 out of 3 versus Rukan with his deck of choice. And then afterwards, maybe he can critique my play a bit and tell me where I did not give Bulu the justice it deserved. Okay, so Rukan, any shout-outs you want to give before the end of the video?
Shout out to my team, Dead Draw Gaming, and shout out to Pokebeach. I'm writing my first article with them on Kikabulu and a bunch of simulations and a little bit of like Zoroark simulations. And that article will come out whenever the editing team is done with me, but it should be relatively soon.
Cool. Sounds good. Okay, Rukan, as always, thank you for being on the channel, and I'll see you guys here next time on Celio's Network.